What would you do if the only thing keeping you alive was a promise you made to the dead? Sarah Whitemoon had been running for 3 days through snow that swallowed her legs to the knees. The blizzard turned everything white, erasing the line between earth and sky. Behind her, wolves howled, their voices sharp as broken glass cutting through wind. Her lungs burned, her legs screamed. The package, wrapped in cloth, pressed against her ribs, precious and heavy. She wasn't running from the wolves. She was running from the promise she couldn't keep. But that came later. 4 days earlier, the world was different. The March sun painted the Ute village gold. Sarah stood in her small cabin, packing supplies into worn leather. Dried meat, herbs her mother taught her to gather, a blanket that smelled of wood smoke and memory. Her hands moved with practice, but her heart was absent. The door opened. Daniel entered, 14 and all awkward limbs, worry creasing his young face.
"Aunt Sarah, you sure about this?" Sarah didn't look up. "Grandfather Joseph left me the land. I have to see it." "But you haven't left the village since—" Daniel's voice died. They both knew. Since Ava. Since Thomas. Since everything ended and Sarah kept breathing anyway. The photograph sat on the wooden table by the window. 3 faces smiled from another life. Thomas, with gentle eyes and strong hands that could carve beauty from wood. Ava, at 17, all light and laughter and futures she would never see. And Sarah, younger, whole, still believing. 2 years since the grizzly took Thomas. 2 years since consumption claimed Ava 3 months later, her young body too weak to fight. Sarah had held her daughter through those final nights, made promises she couldn't keep, that everything would be all right, that tomorrow would be better. Liars make promises. She placed the photograph face down. "I made a promise to Grandfather Joseph. I keep my promises." The words tasted like ash, but she said them. Outside, Elder Tahoma waited by 2 horses. 80 years had carved his face into a map of wisdom. He pressed a leather pouch into Daniel's hand. "To protect you, the mountain is dangerous for those not ready." His eyes found Sarah's. "The sacred land is waiting. Don't let our ancestors fall into shadow." "I won't." Another promise, another wait. 4 hours of climbing through valleys where aspen stood white as bone, past streams singing songs older than memory. The air grew thin. The world grew vast and indifferent. Daniel chattered nervously at first, but Sarah's silence was a stone that wore his words to nothing. 3 hours up, Sarah saw the tracks. Fresh wagon ruts cut deep. Trees showed raw stumps, wood chips still pale and bleeding. Someone had been here, recently, with heavy loads. White men, on sacred ground. Her hand found her knife. "Stay close, eyes open." By late afternoon, the cabin appeared through the pines, larger than Sarah remembered from childhood. 2 rooms of solid logs, stone chimney, windows catching dying light like fragments of fire. But the door hung open. No smoke rose. The cabin felt like a mouth slack in death. Sarah signaled Daniel to stay with the horses. She approached silent as shadow, every sense screaming danger. Joseph would never leave a door open to the mountain's mercy. She pressed against the rough logs, listened. Wind through pines, a distant hawk. And beneath it, something that didn't belong. A low rumble, deep in the chest. Animal. Her bow came up, arrow knocked. She pushed the door with her foot. The mountain lion stood in the center of the room, 6 feet nose to tail, 120 pounds of killing power, coat the color of autumn leaves. But her eyes held Sarah frozen, golden, calm, intelligent, assessing. Sarah had encountered mountain lions before, but never this close, never inside human walls, never feeling so completely evaluated. Every instinct screamed, "Run!" But Sarah Whitemoon had lost everything already. Fear was just another feeling to ignore. She lowered her bow slowly, not dropping it, just enough to show she meant no threat. "Sister," she whispered in Ute, "I am Sarah, granddaughter of Joseph Silverwolf. I am not your enemy." The lion's ears swiveled forward. Nothing moved. Then the great cat shifted, revealing what she guarded. 3 cubs huddled by the cold fireplace, 4 months old, eyes still blue-gray, spots not yet faded. They mewed softly, uncertain. Understanding crashed over Sarah. The lion had chosen this place, claimed it as den, and now she protected her young the only way she knew. Sarah remembered her grandfather's words. When the guardian appears, the mountain is in danger. Mountain lions were sacred to the Ute, protectors of high places, messengers between flesh and spirit. To see one was a sign. To have one stay was prophecy. "You're the guardian," Sarah breathed. "You know something's wrong." The lion's tail twitched. Then, deliberately, she turned and padded toward the back room. Paused in the doorway, looking back. Invitation or test? The front door burst open. "Aunt Sarah, I heard something." Daniel froze. His eyes went moon-wide, seeing the lion. His hand fumbled for the stick at his belt. "Daniel, don't move." "But it's a mountain lion. The guardian grandfather told us about—" "I know. Stay still." The great cat regarded Daniel with the same measuring stare. The boy stood frozen, chest rising and falling too fast. Then the lion dipped her head once, almost like a nod, and disappeared into the back room. Daniel released a breath, half sob, half laugh. "What just happened?" "I think we just got permission to stay." They entered fully, moving with careful reverence. The main room was simple but well built. Stone fireplace, its hearth cold but clean. Shelves holding Joseph's books on herbs, stories, mountain ways. A table beneath the window. Everything exactly as it should be. Except for the family living here on 4 legs instead of 2. Sarah knelt by the fireplace. Her fingers found the loose stone her grandfather showed her as a child. Some secrets are worth keeping. Some stones are worth moving. The stone came free. Beneath it, wrapped in oiled leather, was a cedar box. Daniel crowded close. "What is it?" Sarah's hands trembled, lifting it free. Beautifully carved, mountains, wolves, sun and moon in eternal dance. Your great-grandfather's secrets. The box opened with a soft click, papers in careful order. Sarah lifted the first, recognizing angular handwriting immediately. "My granddaughter, if you are reading this, I am gone. Don't mourn long. I lived 72 years, most of them good." Sarah's vision blurred. She blinked hard. Daniel's hand found her shoulder. "This land, Sacred Bear Mountain, holds $40 million in minerals. Mitchell Kane knows this. He killed Marcus Redbird for refusing to sell. He will kill whoever stands in his way." Sarah's breath caught. Marcus Redbird. The kind man who gave her honey candy as a child, found dead 3 years ago. Everyone said he fell. Everyone said accident. I transferred ownership to you because you are stronger than you know. You survived losing Thomas and Ava. You can survive this. But you cannot do it alone. Trust those the mountain sends. The guardian will come. Protect our ancestors' graves. Keep your promise. Your grandfather, Joseph. The letter fell from nerveless fingers. Daniel picked it up, his face hardening as he read. They killed him, this Cain. He killed grandfather Joseph. Sarah looked at other papers, maps showing the mountain's interior, photographs of mining operations, great gouges in earth, streams running orange, a list of names and dates. Marcus Redbird, Tom Blackhorse, William Eaglefeather, each followed by one word: accident, accident, accident.
At the bottom, in fresh ink, Joseph Silverwolf, natural causes. As if a healthy man of 72 simply forgot to breathe. Sarah's grief hardened into something colder. Rage. Hoofbeats shattered the moment. Many, coming fast. Sarah was at the window in 3 steps. 6 riders emerged from trees. At their head, a man in an expensive coat too fine for mountains, face soft and pale beneath beaver skin hat. Behind him, death in human form, tall, broad, moving with coiled readiness. Get down, into the root cellar, now! But now, Daniel! The boy grabbed the box, scrambled through the hidden trapdoor. Sarah lowered it quietly, then stood by the door, bow in hands, arrow nocked. Outside, horses stopped. Leather creaked. Footsteps on porch, heavy, confident. Sarah's heart hammered, but her hands were steady. The worst had already happened. Death held no terror. The door swung open. 6 men filled the doorway. Sarah's eyes went to the one in the expensive coat, perhaps 50, running to fat, pale skin, speaking of too much time indoors. His eyes swept the cabin like a man pricing estate sale furniture. Well, this is unexpected. I was told the property was vacant. The tall man behind him spotted Sarah. Hand moved toward his gun, stopped when the pale man raised one soft hand. Now, Vincent, let's be civilized. I'm Mitchell Kane, and this land belongs to Blackstone Mining Corporation. You're trespassing. Sarah's arrow never wavered from Kane's chest. I have the deed, legal, witnessed by Reverend Samuel Price. Joseph Silverwolf transferred this to me before he died. Kane's eyebrows rose. Silverwolf, the old man. His eyes narrowed. And you are? Sarah Whitemoon, his granddaughter. Miss Whitemoon, there's been a misunderstanding. Your grandfather signed an agreement with Blackstone 6 months ago. Sold mineral rights for a fair price. The land reverts to us upon his death. Lies wrapped in truth's clothing. Show me this agreement. Kane spread his hands in regret. Being filed with territorial court as we speak. Sheriff Hoskins can verify. In fact, he's expecting us to take possession today. Sheriff Hoskins works for you. Kane's smile never reached his eyes. Sheriff Hoskins works for the law. Now, I'm reasonable. I'll offer compensation. $100 for your trouble. Generous for rocks and trees. $100. For land holding 40 million. For graves holding 10 generations. For the last piece of her grandfather left in this world. Sarah's arrow drew back another inch.
Get off my land. Now. Vincent's hand completed its journey to his gun. Other men shifted, hands moving to weapons. Then a voice cut through like a blade through silk. I wouldn't do that if I were you. A man stood in the doorway Sarah hadn't heard open. Tall, perhaps 6 feet, shoulders speaking of hard work and harder living. Skin the deep bronze of desert Apache.
Hair black and long, held by faded red bandana. A scar ran temple to jaw, white against darker skin. In his hands, a rifle pointed with casual certainty at Kane's head. His eyes were the color of old whiskey, and just as dangerous. This lady says it's her land. I suggest you take her at her word. Kane's face flushed. Who the hell are you? Red Skywalker, Apache, former Army scout, current proprietor of a very short temper. He shifted the rifle slightly. You boys have 10 seconds to mount up before I start counting bodies. Vincent's eyes went cold. You're 1 man. We're 6. Red Sky's smile had no humor. I'm 1 Apache with a Henry rifle and 30 years tracking men who thought they were smarter than me. Last man who assumed those were good odds is buried in 3 different counties. Care to make it 4? Silence stretched like pulled wire. Sarah held her breath, arrow still trained, while this stranger held death suspended between heartbeats. Kane's forced laugh broke tension. No need for violence. We'll settle this through proper legal channels. Sheriff Hoskins will sort everything out. He turned to Sarah. You have until tomorrow. After that, we're back with proper authorities. He gestured to his men. They backed toward the door. Vincent was last to leave, eyes on Red Sky, with one predator recognizing another. See you soon. Looking forward to it. The door closed. Hoofbeats faded. Sarah lowered her bow, arms trembling. She turned to the stranger. Thank you. But who are you really? And why are you in my grandfather's cabin? Red Sky lowered his rifle, leaned it against the wall. Your grandfather and I had an arrangement. He let me winter here for keeping watch. Found him dead 3 weeks ago. Heart attack, the doc said. His eyes found Sarah's. Didn't look like any heart attack I ever saw. You think they killed him? I know they did. Question is, what are you going to do about it? The trapdoor lifted. Daniel's head emerged like a prairie dog checking for hawks. There's another one? Nephew. This is... I don't know what to call you. Red Sky's fine. Boy can come out. They're gone, for now. Daniel climbed out, clutching the cedar box. Are you going to help Aunt Sarah fight the bad men? Red Sky's eyes moved between Sarah and the boy, then to the box. What's in there? Sarah hesitated, then decided. This man risked his life for strangers. That counted. She took the box, spread contents on the table. Red Sky studied documents in silence. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. Evidence of murder. Multiple murders. Federal crimes. This reaches the right people. Kane and everyone with him will hang. If it reaches the right people. Sheriff Hoskins controls telegraph and mail routes. Someone needs to ride to Silverton. 3 days there and back. Get word to Federal Marshal. And leave the cabin undefended? They'll burn it. Destroy evidence. Red Sky was quiet. Then he looked up, and Sarah saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Recognition. One wounded creature seeing another, knowing without words the shape of their pain. You came up here alone to honor a dead man's wish. Why? Sarah's hand found the photograph in her pocket. She drew it out. Thomas and Ava, smiling in lamplight Daniel had just lit. Because I promised him I'd protect this place.
and I'm done breaking promises to the dead." Red Sky studied the photograph, then Sarah's face, then the mountain lion who had emerged silently to sit watching with golden eyes. Apache and Ute, cousin tribes, both mountain people. Both know how to survive where others can't. He extended his hand. "Partners?" Sarah looked at his hand, at the scar on his face and old pain in his eyes, and the way he held himself like a man broken and badly mended, but still standing. She clasped his hand. His grip was warm, calloused, steady as stone. "Partners." Outside, wind picked up, carrying the smell of coming snow. Somewhere, in darkness, wolves began to howl. And on Sacred Bear Mountain, 3 people and 1 mountain lion settled in for a siege they could not possibly win. But Sarah Whitemoon had learned something in her years of grief. Sometimes, the only thing that matters is not whether you can win. Sometimes, the only thing that matters is that you showed up to fight. She had made a promise to the dead, and the dead had a way of making sure those promises were kept. The fire crackled in the stone hearth, throwing shadows that danced across the cabin walls like memories refusing to stay buried. Sarah sat with her back against rough-hewn logs, watching Red Sky work. His hands moved with the practiced efficiency of a man who had spent years preparing for battles he hoped would never come. He was setting tripwires. Outside, darkness had swallowed the mountain whole, the kind of darkness that existed before men invented fire, before they learned to push back the night with anything more than hope and prayer. In that darkness, Mitchell Kane's men were out there, somewhere, waiting, planning, deciding how best to kill 3 people and a mountain lion without leaving evidence that would trouble their sleep. Daniel sat at the table, trying to tie knots the way Red Sky had shown him. His young fingers fumbled with the rope, pulling it too tight, then too loose, then into a tangle that looked like something a drunk spider might weave. "I can't do this," the boy muttered, frustration making his voice crack. Red Sky glanced over from the window, where he was rigging a bell system to empty tin cans. "Here." He crossed the room in 3 long strides, his limp barely noticeable now that Sarah knew to look for it. "Loop it like this. Under, over, pull through." Daniel watched, tried again, failed again. "You're thinking too hard," Red Sky said. His voice carried the patience of a man who had taught many young warriors many necessary things. "Let your hands remember, not your mind." "How long did it take you to learn?" "About 2 hours. But I was motivated. Apache War Party was half a day behind us, and my sergeant told me if I didn't learn to secure our gear, he'd tie me to a cactus and let them find me first." Sarah saw the ghost of a smile touch Daniel's lips. "Did you learn?" "Fastest 2 hours of my life." Red Sky's expression shifted, something dark moving behind his eyes like a fish beneath ice. "Spent the next 7 years wishing I'd let them catch me instead." The smile died on Daniel's face. He looked down at his hands, at the rope now miraculously forming a proper knot. "Because of what you had to do?" "Because of what I chose to do. Big difference." Sarah spoke for the first time in an hour. Her voice came out rough, unused. "You don't have to help us. You could leave. Be gone before they come back." Red Sky didn't turn from the window. "Could, but then I'd spend the next 7 years wishing I'd stayed. Already got enough regrets to fill a lifetime. Don't need more." "Why?" Sarah pressed. She needed to understand this man who had appeared like smoke
and inserted himself into a fight that wasn't his. "You don't know me. Don't owe my grandfather anything. Why risk your life?" Red Sky was quiet for so long, Sarah thought he wouldn't answer. Then he turned, and in the firelight, his scar looked like a canyon carved by ancient rivers. Red Sky was quiet for so long, Sarah thought he wouldn't answer. Then he turned, and in the firelight, his scar looked like a canyon carved by ancient rivers. "You asked why I stay. I told you about Ayanna before, about losing her while I was away serving the army." His hands clenched. "What I didn't tell you was the guilt, that I chose orders over her, chose duty to men who saw us as less than human, over being there when my wife needed me most." He moved to the fire, staring into flames like they held answers to questions he'd stopped asking years ago. "Army sent me out on a 6-week patrol in 1879, tracking Victorio's band through New Mexico. When I got back to the reservation, she was gone. Influenza. Swept through the camps while all the able-bodied men were out helping the very soldiers who'd put us there." His hands clenched. "I wasn't there. Couldn't hold her. Couldn't tell her I loved her one last time. Couldn't do a damn thing except bury her in ground that wasn't even our ancestral land." Sarah felt something break open in her chest. She knew that pain. Knew it the way she knew the shape of her own bones. "I know what it's like," she said quietly, "to watch someone die and be helpless to stop it." Red Sky's eyes found hers across the fire. In that moment, they weren't Apache and Ute, weren't strangers thrown together by circumstance. They were just two people who had loved and lost and somehow kept breathing anyway. "So that's why I stay," Red Sky finished. "Because maybe if I can help you save what matters to you, it'll balance the scales a little. Won't bring Ayanna back. Won't erase what I did wearing that uniform. But it's something." Daniel had stopped pretending to work on knots. He was watching them both with eyes too old for his 14 years. "My father died in a mining accident 2 years ago. Blackstone Mining owned that operation too. Tunnel collapsed. They said it was bad luck. My mother died from grief 6 months later. That's when Aunt Sarah took me in. 15 men died that day, and Kane never paid a cent to the families." Sarah's head snapped toward her nephew. "I didn't know that." "Mama didn't like to talk about it, but I heard her crying at night. Heard her telling my sister that Kane's money was built on bones." Daniel's voice hardened. "So this is my fight, too. Not just yours, Aunt Sarah. Mine." Before Sarah could respond, a sound cut through the night. Distant but clear. Bells. Red Sky was at the window in one fluid motion, rifle already in his hands. "They're here. Earlier than I expected." Sarah grabbed her bow, moving to the opposite window. Through the darkness, she could see nothing. But she could hear. Horses. Multiple. Moving slow and careful, but not careful enough. "How many?" she whispered. 8, maybe 9. They left the horses a quarter-mile back, coming in on foot. "How can you tell?" "Because that's what I'd do." The mountain lion emerged from the back room where her cubs slept. She moved to the door, a low growl building in her chest like distant thunder. "She knows," Daniel breathed. Red Sky glanced at the great cat, then back to the darkness. "Smart. She can smell them better than we can see them." "What's the plan?" Sarah's fingers found an arrow, knocked it, the motion as natural as breathing. "They'll try to draw us out. Make noise. Shoot at the cabin. Get us scared enough to run or stupid enough to charge. We don't give them either. We wait. And if they rush us, then we make them regret it. The first gunshot shattered the night like breaking glass. The bullet punched through the window near Sarah's head, spraying splinters across her cheek. She didn't flinch. More shots followed, 12, 24. The cabin's thick log walls absorbed most, but some found gaps, whistling through the interior like angry wasps. Daniel dove under the table. Sarah dropped below the window line, crawling toward a better position. Red Sky didn't move. He stood in the shadows beside his window, patient as stone, waiting. "Sarah White Moon," a voice boomed from the darkness. Vincent Dutch, the professional. "You're surrounded. Come out with your hands up and nobody else has to die tonight." Red Sky's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Nobody else. Meaning they've already decided we're dead. Thoughtful of them to clarify. "What do we do?" Daniel's voice came out higher than he probably wanted. "We let them think they're winning," Red Sky said. He fired once, deliberately high, nowhere near any living target. "Give them confidence." Sarah understood. Overconfident men make mistakes. "How long do we wait?" "Until they're close enough to see their faces." The shooting stopped. Silence rushed back in, thick and oppressive. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She forced herself to breathe slowly, the way her father had taught her before her first hunt. Fear makes you stupid. Panic makes you dead. Calm makes you dangerous. Movement in the trees. Shadows separating from shadows. Men advancing in a loose line, using cover well but not perfectly. Sarah counted 6 visible, which meant 2 or 3 were flanking, circling to the back or sides. Red Sky saw them too. "Daniel, back room. Watch the rear window. Anyone tries to come through, you yell. Don't try to be a hero." "But I can help." "You can help by staying alive and watching our backs. Go." The boy went, clutching a knife that looked too big for his hands. The men were 50 yards out now, close enough to see details, rifles and pistols, torches in the hands of 2. They meant to burn them out. "Torches," Sarah whispered. "I see them. Let them get closer." 40 yards, 30. Sarah could see faces now in the torchlight. Hard men, the kind who did ugly work for ugly money and slept fine afterward. These weren't reluctant soldiers following orders. These were believers in the gospel of profit. 20 yards. "Now," Red Sky said. Sarah stood and loosed her arrow in one smooth motion. It took the torchbearer in the shoulder, exactly where she'd aimed. Not to kill, to wound, to make him drop the torch into dry pine needles and last year's fallen leaves. The forest floor erupted in flame. Men shouted, scrambling back from the sudden fire. The second torchbearer panicked, threw his torch away, but it landed in brush that caught like kindling. Red Sky fired 3 times, precise, controlled. Each bullet found its mark in legs, shoulders, the meaty part of thighs. Men fell screaming, but they'd live, if they were smart enough to retreat. They weren't. Vincent's voice cut through the chaos. "Suppressing fire! Put that cabin to splinters!" The night exploded in muzzle flashes and thunder. Bullets tore through logs, shattered what remained of windows, filled the air with the smell of powder and pine sap and fear. Sarah pressed herself flat against the floor. Above her, the cabin's interior became a storm of lead and wood chips. Something hot grazed her arm. She bit back a cry, rolled to the side, came up beside the stone chimney that would stop anything short of a cannon. Red Sky had moved to a new position. His Henry spoke again. again, methodical as a metronome, each shot a punctuation mark in a conversation written in violence. Then Daniel's voice from the back room, high and terrified. "They're coming through the back!" Sarah was moving before thought. Through the doorway into the bedroom where Joseph had slept his last night before Cain's men took him. Daniel stood at the window, knife raised, as a man's head and shoulders came through the opening. The man saw a boy and grinned. Mistake. Sarah's arrow took him through the upper arm, pinning it to the window frame. He screamed, thrashing, his gun falling to the floor. Daniel grabbed the gun, hands shaking so hard he nearly dropped it. "Don't," Sarah commanded. "You're not a killer yet. Don't start today." The man at the window passed out from pain or shock. Good enough. Back in the main room, something had changed. The shooting had stopped. Sarah risked a look through a gap in the logs. The men were retreating, not running, just pulling back with the discipline of soldiers who knew when to break contact. The forest fires they'd accidentally started were spreading, and the wind was turning, pushing smoke and flame back toward them instead of the cabin. Vincent Dutch stood at the edge of the firelight, staring at the cabin. Even from this distance, Sarah could see the cold calculation in his eyes. He wasn't angry. He was reassessing. Red Sky appeared beside her, breathing hard but steady. "They'll be back." "I know." "With more men. Different tactics." "I know." "We can't hold this cabin forever, Sarah. Eventually they'll bring enough force that we can't stop them." Sarah looked at him. Really looked. At the scar that told stories of violence survived. At eyes that had seen too much and somehow still held kindness. At the set of his shoulders that said he'd stand here until hell froze over, if that's what she needed. "Then we don't just defend," she said. "We attack." Red Sky's eyebrows rose. "You want to explain that?" "Daniel needs to get to Silverton. Send that telegraph. But Cain's men will be watching the trails, expecting us to run. So we make them think we already did. You and I. We go out there, make a lot of noise, lead them on a chase, while Daniel goes the long way around through the passes only Ute know. By the time they realize we circled back, he'll be gone." Red Sky considered this. "It's dangerous. Everything's dangerous now. It splits our strength. It gives Daniel a chance." A long pause, then Red Sky nodded slowly. "Apache and Ute think alike. We'd have made good allies in the old days, instead of enemies. We're allies now." From the back room, Daniel called out, "The man at the window is waking up." Sarah and Red Sky exchanged glances. Red Sky moved to the bedroom, looked down at the wounded man, now conscious and groaning. "You work for Cain?" Red Sky asked. The man glared up at him through pain-clenched eyes. "Can Cain afford to leave witnesses who can testify?" He was lying. Daniel hadn't left yet, but the man didn't know that. Sarah saw what Red Sky was doing, sowing doubt, making Cain's men think twice, maybe making some of them decide the money wasn't worth hanging. They bandaged the man's arm with strips torn from an old shirt, gave him water, sent him stumbling out into the night toward his companions. When he was gone, Red Sky turned to Sarah. "We leave at dawn. Give them tonight to think about what I said. Let doubt work on them. Come morning we make our move. And Daniel? Goes with us part way, then breaks off when we make contact. They chase us, he runs free." Sarah nodded. It was a plan. Not a good plan, but better than waiting here to be slowly overwhelmed. They spent the rest of the night in shifts, Red Sky sleeping first,
his rifle across his chest, looking like a man who'd learned to rest anywhere, because tomorrow might not offer another chance. Then Sarah, though sleep came thin and troubled, full of dreams where Ava called her name from a distance she could never cross. Daniel didn't sleep. He sat with the mountain lion, who had returned to her cubs, but seemed content to let the boy sit nearby. In the dim light, Sarah watched her nephew reach out slowly, fingers trembling, and touch the great cat's head. The lion didn't move, didn't growl, just sat there, accepting comfort or giving it. Sarah couldn't tell which. When dawn came, it painted the sky in shades of blood and gold. They packed light, food for 3 days, ammunition, water skins, the documents from Joseph's box, wrapped in oiled cloth and secured in Sarah's pack. Everything else they left. The cabin that had been Joseph's, that had briefly been theirs, sat quiet in the morning light. Sarah looked at it, memorizing details she knew she might never see again. Red sky touched her shoulder. Ready? No, but that's never stopped anything that needed doing. They moved into the forest as the sun broke over the eastern peaks. Red sky in front, reading sign invisible to anyone else. Daniel in the middle, young legs trying to match the pace of people who'd spent lives in mountains. Sarah in the rear, bow strung, arrow always ready. They'd gone perhaps 2 miles when Red Sky raised his fist. Stop! Sarah froze, listened, heard it. Men, talking low, close. Red Sky pointed. 2 men, 50 yards ahead, sitting on logs and passing a canteen between them. Sentries, watching the trail. Red Sky made hand signals, old Army scout language that Sarah didn't know but somehow understood anyway. Circle left, avoid contact, keep moving. They melted into the trees like smoke into sky. But someone had gotten careless. A branch broke under Daniel's foot with a crack like a gunshot. The sentries jumped up, saw them, shouted. "Go!" Red Sky commanded. They ran. Behind them, more shouts, men mobilizing. The hunt was on. Sarah's legs burned as they climbed. The altitude here made breathing hard, made running harder. But she'd been born in these mountains. They were in her blood and bones and every breath she'd ever taken. Daniel was flagging. Red Sky grabbed his arm, half dragging the boy over rough ground. A gunshot cracked. Close. Too close. They reached a fork in the trail. Red Sky pointed left. "That way. Make noise. Let them hear you." Daniel understood. "What about you?" "I'm going with your aunt. We'll lead them away. You cut back. Take the high pass. Don't stop until you reach Silverton." "But—" "Go," Sarah commanded. She grabbed her nephew's face in both hands, forced him to look at her. "You're the only one who can do this. Understand? The only one. Grandfather Joseph is counting on you. I'm counting on you. Now run." Daniel's eyes filled with tears, but he nodded. Then he was gone, disappearing into the forest like a deer before wolves. Sarah and Red Sky ran left, making as much noise as 2 people could, breaking branches, dislodging stones, leaving clear tracks a blind man could follow. It worked. The pursuit veered their direction. They ran for an hour, maybe more. Time became meaningless, measured only in burning lungs and screaming muscles, and the certain knowledge that stopping meant dying. Finally, Red Sky pulled her into a narrow ravine hidden behind a waterfall. The sound of cascading water would cover their voices. They collapsed against wet stone, gasping. "Did we lose them?" Sarah managed between breaths. "For now, they'll circle back, realize we split up, but it'll take time." Enough time for Daniel? Hope so. They sat in spray and shadow, listening to water and their own hammering hearts. Sarah's arm throbbed where the bullet had grazed it. Red Sky's limp was worse after the run, his old wound complaining. "Why'd you really come to this mountain?" Sarah asked. Not because she needed to know, because the silence was too heavy and the darkness too close. Red Sky was quiet for a long time. Then, "Looking for a place to die, if I'm honest. Somewhere clean. Somewhere the land wouldn't be ashamed to take me back." "And now?" "Now I'm thinking maybe I found a reason to live instead." He looked at her. "Funny how that works." Sarah felt something shift in her chest, something that had been frozen for 2 years, cracking like ice in spring thaw. Before she could name it, voices echoed from above. Men, searching. "Time to move," Red Sky whispered. They emerged from the ravine on the opposite side from where they'd entered. The mountain rose above them, ancient and indifferent to the small dramas of those who crawled across its face. Sarah touched the stone, whispered a prayer her grandmother had taught her. To the mountain, to the spirits who lived in high places, to whatever force kept the world turning despite all the reasons it had to stop. Then she followed Red Sky deeper into the wild country, toward whatever came next. Behind them, men with guns and greed in their hearts gave chase. Ahead, the mountain waited, patient as stone, old as time, knowing what all mountains know, that empires fall, that gold fades, that the only thing that endures is the land itself, and those willing to die protecting it. 2 days had passed since they'd split from Daniel, and Red Sky was teaching Sarah how to kill a man. Not with weapons, she already knew that, but with patience, with silence, with the kind of stillness that made you invisible even when standing in plain sight. They crouched in the rocks above the pass, watching 3 of Cain's men ride below. The men looked tired, frustrated, like dogs who'd lost the scent and were circling back to find it. They'd been hunting Sarah and Red Sky through these mountains for 48 hours and had nothing to show but sore legs and wounded pride. "We could take them," Sarah whispered. Her bow was already in hand, arrow nocked. "Could," Red Sky agreed. "But should we?" Sarah looked at him. His face was still unreadable in the way she was learning meant he was thinking 3 moves ahead. "Explain." "We kill them, 3 more come. Kill those, 6 come. Kill those, Cain brings 20. It never ends. The only way to win isn't to keep fighting. It's to change what we're fighting for." "I don't understand." Red Sky's eyes tracked the men below as they disappeared around a bend. "Right now, Cain thinks he's fighting for land, for money, for 40 million in rocks he can turn into power. But what if we made him fight for something else? Something he can't win?" "Like what?" "His reputation, his freedom, his life." Before Sarah could ask what he meant, movement caught her eye. Not below, behind them. She spun, arrow coming up, and found herself staring at a face she recognized. Mary Thornfield stood 10 feet away, hands raised peacefully. She was perhaps 60, with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, and eyes that had seen enough of the world to stop being surprised by it. She owned the general store in the town at the mountain's base, and Sarah had bought supplies from her exactly twice. "Easy, child," Mary said. Her voice carried the flat practicality of the frontier, where wasting words was like wasting water. "I'm here to help." Red Sky had his rifle pointed at her chest. "How'd you find us?" "Followed the men following you. Then went around them because I actually know these mountains." She lowered her hands slowly. Got news. Your boy Daniel made it to Silverton. Telegraph went out yesterday. Sarah's heart leapt. He's safe? Safe and smart. Sent the message to a federal marshal in Denver. Name of Harrison. Good man, from what Reverend Price says. Reverend Price sent you? He did. Said you'd need supplies and information. Mary shrugged off a pack, set it on the ground. Food, ammunition, fresh bandages, and intelligence on what Kane's planning. Red Sky hadn't lowered his rifle. Why would you risk this? You don't know us. Mary's eyes went hard as flint. My husband stood up to Mitchell Kane 5 years back, refused to sell our land for his railroad expansion. Barn burned down a week later with my husband inside. Sheriff called it an accident. I know what Kane is, know what he does to people who get in his way. She met Red Sky's gaze without flinching. So yeah, I'm risking this. Because maybe if enough of us stand up, eventually he falls down. Red Sky studied her for a long moment, then lowered his rifle. What's Kane planning? He's hired 20 more men, coming in from Denver on tomorrow's supply train. Plans to overwhelm your cabin, burn it down, claim you died in the fire. Self-defense, he'll say. Then he files for the land as abandoned property. Sarah felt sick. We can't fight 20 men. No, Mary agreed. But you don't have to. That's what I'm here to tell you. The town's starting to turn against him. What do you mean? Mary sat down on a boulder, moving like a woman whose bones remembered harder winters than this one. Kane's been throwing money around, sure. But people are starting to ask questions. How'd old Joseph really die? Why's Kane so eager to burn down a cabin on land he claims to own legally? And now there's federal marshals asking to see records that suddenly can't be found. How many people? Red Sky asked. 12, maybe 15. Townspeople who've had enough. Reverend Price is organizing them. Says if Kane comes for you again, they'll stand with you. Sarah shook her head. They'll get killed. These are shopkeepers and farmers, not soldiers. These are Americans, Mary corrected, and her voice carried steel now. And Americans don't take kindly to being pushed around by men who think money makes them kings. You let us decide what risks we're willing to take. Red Sky was nodding slowly. This changes things. We're not alone anymore. You never were, Mary said. You just didn't know it yet. She reached into her pack again, pulled out a folded paper. One more thing. Reverend Price found this in the county records. Deed to Sacred Bear Mountain, filed 1878. Shows the land was granted to the Ute tribe by federal treaty. Can't be sold or transferred without tribal council approval. Sarah took the paper with shaking hands. Grandfather Joseph never mentioned this. Maybe he didn't know. Or maybe he knew and was keeping it for the right moment. Either way, it means Kane's claim is worthless. He's been trying to steal land he could never legally own. Red Sky leaned over Sarah's shoulder, reading. This is enough to stop him, if we can get it to the federal marshal. Already done, Mary said with satisfaction. Reverend sent a copy with Daniel. Originals locked in the church safe. Kane would have to burn down the house of God to destroy it. And even he's not that stupid. For the first time in days, Sarah felt something like hope. They made their way down the mountain as the sun reached its peak. Mary knew paths even Sarah had forgotten, game trails that wound through terrain too rough for horses. They moved in silence, 3 people who understood that voices carried and mountains had ears. It was mid-afternoon when they reached the tree line above town.
The settlement sprawled below them, maybe 200 souls living in wooden buildings that looked like they'd been dropped from the sky and left wherever they landed. Church steeple, general store, saloon, sheriff's office, the usual components of frontier civilization. "Wait here," Mary said. "I'll bring the others after dark. Kane's got men watching the roads, but they're looking for you coming, not townfolk moving around their own streets." She was gone before Sarah could argue. Red Sky found a spot with good sight lines and settled in to watch the town. Sarah joined him, and they sat in companionable silence as the afternoon crawled toward evening. "Tell me about the army," Sarah said eventually. Not because she needed to fill the quiet, but because she wanted to understand this man who'd become her anchor in a world tilting sideways. Red Sky didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice carried the weight of old stones. "Joined in 1856. 17 years old and stupid enough to think I was helping my people by working with the whites. Served until 1863, then rejoined as scout in 1874 after my wife died. Spent years tracking my own people." He paused, picking up a small rock and turning it over in his scarred hands. "Spent 7 years tracking my own people. Kiowa, Comanche, other Apache who wouldn't come in. Led soldiers to their camps. Watched families get rounded up and marched to reservation. Told myself it was better than letting them get killed. That surrender meant survival." "But you stopped believing that." 1881. We cornered a band of Mescalero Apache in the mountains. Women, children, old people, maybe 30 total. They'd left the reservation because there wasn't enough food, and the agent was selling their rations for profit. Just wanted to hunt, to feed their families. His voice went flat, empty. The way voices do, when the weight of memory is too heavy to carry with emotion. Commander ordered us to bring them in. Said use whatever force necessary. I rode ahead, told them to surrender, promised they wouldn't be hurt. The chief, old man named Grey Wolf, looked at me and said, "You wear their uniform, speak their words, but your eyes remember what you are. You're already dead, grandson. Just haven't fallen yet." Sarah waited. Sometimes the only gift you can give someone is silence to fill with their truth. We brought them in. 2 weeks later, half were dead from disease in the overcrowded camps. Rest were sent to Florida, thousands of miles from their homes. Grey Wolf died on the train, and I realized he was right. I was already dead. Red Sky threw the rock. It arced through the failing light and disappeared into shadow. So I left, resigned my commission. Been wandering ever since, looking for something that would make me feel alive again. He turned to Sarah. Then I found you, found this fight, and I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe this is how I stop being dead. Sarah reached out, covered his hand with hers. You're not dead. You're right here, fighting for something that matters. So are you, for a land you could just walk away from. Could, Sarah echoed his word from earlier. But should I? Red Sky's laugh came quiet and genuine. Stubborn. That's good. Stubborn people survive. They sat together as the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. Below, lamps began lighting in windows, the town settling into evening routines, unaware that tomorrow might bring violence to their streets. As promised, Mary returned after dark with 12 people. Sarah recognized most. John Baker, who ran the feed store. His wife Martha, who made the best bread Sarah had ever tasted.
Robert Chen, who'd come from California during the gold rush and stayed to open a laundry. Young Thomas Gates, barely 20, who worked as a blacksmith's apprentice. Reverend Samuel Price, tall and thin as a reed, with conviction burning in his eyes like banked coals. Others she didn't know, but they all had the same look. Ordinary people who'd decided that sometimes ordinary wasn't enough. Reverend Price spoke first, his voice carrying the authority of a man used to commanding attention from pulpits. "Miss Whitemoon, Mr. Walker, we've come to offer our support, not because we're heroes. Most of us wouldn't know which end of a gun to point if our lives depended on it, but because what's happening here is wrong, and we won't stand silent while wrong tries to dress itself in law." Sarah felt her throat tighten. "You could die. Cain won't hesitate to kill you." "Perhaps," the Reverend agreed, "but we'll die as free men and women who chose to stand for something. Better than living as cowards who chose nothing." John Baker stepped forward. "Got 15 rifles and enough ammunition to make Cain think twice. Most of us can shoot straight enough to hit what we're aiming at. That's got to count for something." Red Sky had been studying them all with his scout's eye. "Can you follow orders? When the shooting starts, people panic. Panic gets you killed." "We can follow orders," Martha Baker said firmly. "Did it during the grasshopper plague of 76. Did it during the flood of 79. We know how to work together when it matters." Robert Chen cleared his throat. "There is more. The telegraph operator, he is friend of mine. He saw a message from Cain to Denver. Cain is bringing 20 men on train tomorrow, but train stops at Water Tower before town. If we are there first, we can delay them. Give Marshall more time to arrive." Red Sky nodded slowly. "Smart. How long can you delay?" "Half day, maybe. Telegraph operator can send false message about track damage. Make train stop for inspection." "That might be enough." Red Sky looked at Sarah. "Your call. These are your people, your fight. Do we accept their help?" Sarah looked at the faces surrounding her. Saw fear there, yes, but also determination. The kind of stubborn refusal to bend that had built nations from wilderness. "We accept," she said, "and thank you, all of you." Reverend Price smiled. "Don't thank us yet. Thank us when we're all still breathing on the other side of this." They spent the next hour planning. Red Sky's military training showed as he organized them into groups, assigned positions, explained sightlines and fields of fire in terms even shopkeepers could understand. He was patient, thorough, treating them like the soldiers they'd need to become. Young Thomas raised his hand. "Mr. Walker, sir, what about the sheriff? He's Cain's man. Won't he try to stop us?" "Sheriff Hoskins is one man with a badge and a big mouth," Mary said before Red Sky could answer. "I'll handle him. Got enough dirt on that man to bury him twice over. He tries to interfere, whole town's gonna hear about where his gambling money really comes from." That got a few nervous laughs. The tension eased slightly. As the meeting broke up, Reverend Price approached Sarah. "Walk with me a moment?" They moved away from the others, into the darkness beneath the pines. Above them, stars were beginning to pierce the evening sky. "Your grandfather was a good man," the Reverend said. "Helped my church more times than I can count. Never asked for anything in return. Just said it was his duty to help those who helped others." "I didn't know." "He was private about his generosity. Said the moment you start helping for recognition is the moment you stop actually helping." The Reverend paused. "He came to see me 2 weeks before he died. Asked me to witness the deed transferred to you. Said you were the strongest person he knew, even if you didn't know it yourself." Sarah felt tears burning. I'm not strong. I'm terrified. Strength isn't the absence of fear, child. It's fighting anyway. He pulled something from his pocket, a small leather pouch, similar to the one Daniel carried. Your grandfather asked me to give you this if anything happened to him. Said you'd know when to open it. Sarah took the pouch. It was warm, as if it had absorbed heat from the Reverend's body, or perhaps from something deeper. What's in it? Don't know. He sealed it himself, said it was between him and you and the ancestors. They walked back to the others. Red Sky was demonstrating how to load a rifle to Martha Baker, who was paying such fierce attention you'd think she was preparing for an exam instead of possible death. Mary caught Sarah's eye and jerked her head toward the edge of camp. Sarah followed. Something you need to know, Mary said quietly. That mountain lion of yours? The one at the cabin? What about her? She's been seen in town. 3 different people reported a big cat moving through the edges of the settlement. Scared some folks, but she hasn't hurt anyone. Just watching. Like she's looking for something. Sarah felt something twist in her chest. Her cubs. That's what I'm thinking. Kane's men probably found them when they burned your cabin. If they killed those cubs... Mary didn't finish, didn't need to. Sarah knew what a mother would do for her children. Knew the rage that came when the thing you loved most was taken. She'd felt it when Ava died. Felt it still, a cold ember that never quite went out. If they hurt her babies, Sarah said slowly, Kane's going to learn what it means to make an enemy of something that has nothing left to lose. Mary nodded. Figured you'd understand that better than most. They returned to find Red Sky finishing his impromptu weapons training. He looked up as Sarah approached, and something in her face made him go still. What's wrong? Sarah told him about the mountain lion, about the cubs, about what it might mean. Red Sky's expression went dark. If that cat comes into town looking for revenge, and there's shooting already happening, it's going to be chaos. People will panic. Can't fight Kane's men and a scared mountain lion at the same time. She's not our enemy. No, but she doesn't know that. All she knows is her children are gone, and humans are to blame. She won't distinguish between Kane's men and ours. Sarah opened the pouch Reverend Price had given her. Inside was a small carved stone, smooth and ancient, with symbols etched into its surface. Utah symbols. And a note in her grandfather's hand. The guardian answers to those who carry the old blood. Show her this. She will know. Sarah closed her fingers around the stone. It was warm, impossibly warm, like it held a fire at its core. I can talk to her, Sarah said. That's insane. Maybe, but it's also the only chance we have. Red Sky looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded, the way a good partner does when you're about to do something stupid but necessary. Then we better hope your grandfather knew what he was talking about. The town below them was settling into uneasy sleep. Tomorrow, the train would come. Kane's reinforcements would arrive. And somewhere in the darkness, a mother was hunting for her children, ready to tear apart anyone who stood between her and what she'd lost. Sarah touched the warm stone in her pocket and whispered a prayer to ancestors she'd never met, but whose blood ran in her veins. Then she began planning for a battle that would be won or lost, not by bullets and bravery alone, but by understanding that sometimes the most dangerous allies were the ones who had nothing left to lose. Above them, the mountain waited, patient as stone, old as time, And somewhere in its shadows, golden eyes were watching. The guardian was coming home. That night, as Sarah sat by the fire, testing the carved stone's warmth, static crackled from Joseph's old radio equipment Mary had brought. She'd left it on, monitoring Kane's frequencies. A voice cut through the static. Familiar. Too familiar. "Kane, this is Hoskins. The woman's made contact with townspeople. Reverend Price is organizing them." Sarah's blood went cold. She recognized that voice. Sheriff Clay Hoskins. The man who'd claimed to be neutral, who'd promised to uphold the law.
Kane's response came sharp. "How many?" "Maybe 15. Nothing we can't handle. I'll make sure they're arrested for disturbing the peace before they can help her." "Good. You're earning your money, Sheriff. Just make sure it's in my account by Friday. My gambling debts won't wait." The transmission ended. Sarah sat, frozen, the betrayal cutting deeper than she'd expected. She'd suspected Hoskins was corrupt, but hearing him sell out his own people for gambling money made it real. Red Sky appeared at her shoulder. "You heard?" "Every word." Sarah's hand clenched around the carved stone. "He's not just taking Kane's money. He's actively working against us." "Then we use it, record it, add it to the evidence." Sarah looked at the radio equipment. Joseph had been recording everything. Sure enough, a wire cylinder had captured Hoskins' treachery in his own voice. "One more nail in Kane's coffin," Sarah said quietly. "And one more reason to fight." The train was late. Red Sky stood on the ridge above the water tower, watching the eastern horizon where smoke should have appeared an hour ago. Below him, Robert Chen and 3 townsmen crouched behind barrels they'd positioned to look like routine maintenance. The trap was set. The bait was ready. But the prey wasn't coming. "Something's wrong," Red Sky said. Sarah lay beside him in the tall grass, her bow within easy reach. Maybe the telegraph worked. Maybe they believed the message about track damage. Or maybe Kane's smarter than we gave him credit for. As if summoning demons by speaking their names, movement caught Red Sky's eye. Not from the east where the train should come, from the west, from town. Riders, at least 15, moving fast and purposeful toward the base of the mountain. "They're not waiting for reinforcements," Sarah breathed. "They're attacking now." Red Sky's mind raced through possibilities, discarding them as fast as they formed. Kane had outmaneuvered them, sent word ahead to attack while his main force was still en route, knowing Sarah and Red Sky would be watching the train. Classic pincer movement. Divide attention. Strike where defenses are weakest. "The cabin," Sarah said, her voice tight. "They're going for the cabin again." "There's nothing there. We already moved everything important." "The Guardian's cubs. If they survived the first fire, they'd go back there. It's their den." Red Sky understood instantly. "And if Kane's men find them, they'll kill them. Use them as bait to draw the mother out. Or draw me out." She was already moving, sliding backward down the ridge before Red Sky could stop her. He grabbed her arm. "It's a trap. They want you to come running." "I know." "You go down there alone, you die." Sarah looked at him with eyes that had already seen too much death to be afraid of one more. "Those cubs are innocent. They didn't ask to be part of this. I won't let them die because Kane wants land he has no right to." Red Sky held her gaze, saw the steel beneath, knew arguing would waste time they didn't have. "Then we both go, but we do it smart." He whistled, a sound like a hawk's cry that carried down to Robert Chen. The man looked up, saw Red Sky's hand signals, understood. Chen gathered his men,
and began moving toward town, not running, but walking with the purposeful stride of men heading home from honest work. Nothing to draw attention. Nothing to make Kane's riders suspicious. Sarah and Red Sky took a different route, moving through terrain too rough for horses, using game trails and Sarah's intimate knowledge of the mountain. They ran where they could, climbed where they couldn't, driven by the certainty that time was bleeding away like water through cupped hands. They reached the cabin's clearing just as the riders arrived from the other direction.
Red Sky pulled Sarah down behind a fallen log, both of them breathing hard from the climb. From their position, they could see the cabin's charred remains. The fire from 2 nights ago had gutted the interior, leaving only blackened logs and the stone chimney standing like a grave marker. Vincent Dutch dismounted first, his movements efficient and controlled. Behind him, 12 men spread out in a loose perimeter, professional, disciplined. These weren't the same thugs from before. These were Kane's best. "Search it," Dutch ordered. "Anything that looks like evidence, you burn. Anything that moves, you shoot." The men moved into the ruins. Sarah's fingers found the carved stone in her pocket, the one her grandfather had left for her. It was hot now, almost too hot to hold, pulsing with a warmth that seemed to come from somewhere beyond the physical world. A man's shout from the cabin. "Got something!" Dutch crossed to him in 3 long strides. The man was pointing into what had been the back room. Even from this distance, Sarah could hear it. A sound that made her heart clench. Mewling. Frightened. Young. The cubs. Dutch pulled his pistol. "Finish them." "Wait," another man said. "We could use them. Bait for the mother. Hell, bait for the woman, too. She seems the type to get stupid over animals." Dutch considered this. "Smart. Bag them. We'll take them back to town, set up in the square. When the woman comes for them, we'll be ready." He raised his voice. "Mount up. We got what we came for." Sarah was moving before thought. Red Sky grabbed for her, but she was already gone, bursting from cover with a scream that was half war cry, half mother's anguish. Her first arrow took the man reaching for the cubs through the shoulder. He went down screaming. Her second arrow shattered the lantern in another man's hand, spraying burning oil across his shirt. He dropped and rolled, beating at flames. Chaos erupted, men shouting, guns coming up. But Sarah was already moving, using the cabin's remains for cover, firing arrows with the speed and precision of someone who'd been hunting since she could walk. Red Sky had no choice but to follow. His rifle spoke once, twice, 3 times. Each shot found its mark in legs, arms, shoulders, wounding, not killing, because Red Sky knew that dead men brought federal marshals asking hard questions, but wounded men just brought doctors. Dutch had his gun out, searching for a target. "There, in the trees!" Bullets tore through wood and leaves. Sarah felt one pass so close to her head she could feel its heat. She dove behind the stone chimney, the only thing still standing that could stop lead. From inside the ruins, the cubs' cries rose higher, terrified by noise and smell of powder smoke. "Forget them," Dutch was shouting. "Focus on the woman. Kane wants her dead." That's when the mountain lion attacked. She came from the tree line like golden lightning, 120 pounds of fury and maternal rage. The first man never saw her coming. She hit him from behind, driving him to the ground, jaws closing on his shoulder. Not killing, just removing him from the fight. The second man turned and fired. Missed. The lion was already moving, flowing like water around obstacles, impossibly fast. She slashed across his thigh with claws that could open a deer from neck to belly. He went down screaming. Panic rippled through Kane's men like wind through wheat. These were men used to fighting other men,
predators who understood guns and tactics and the rules of human violence. But this was something older, something that answered to different rules. Dutch tried to rally them. "Form up! It's just an animal. Form up and shoot it!" But fear is contagious, and courage dies when you're staring into eyes that see you as meat. The mountain lion didn't press her attack.
She'd accomplished what she came for, created chaos, broken their formation. Now she circled toward the cabin ruins, toward the sound of her cubs. Sarah saw her chance. While men were scattered and Dutch was trying to reorganize, she sprinted from the chimney to the cabin's back wall, vaulted over charred logs, landed inside what had been the bedroom. The cubs were there, huddled in a corner that the fire had somehow missed. 3 balls of spotted fur, eyes wide with terror, mewling for their mother. Sarah grabbed the first one. It hissed, tried to bite, but she wrapped it in her jacket, grabbed the second, the third. A shadow fell across her. She looked up into Vincent Dutch's gun barrel. "End of the line, Miss White Moon." Sarah held the cubs against her chest, felt their small hearts hammering through fur and fabric. "You'll have to shoot through them to get to me." Dutch's jaw clenched. Whatever else he wasn't a man who killed babies, not even animal ones.
"Put them down. Walk away. This doesn't have to end with you dead." "Yes, it does, because I won't walk away, and you won't either. Cain owns you too completely. He pays well. Blood money. How do you sleep?" Dutch's eyes flickered. Something moved behind them. Doubt, maybe. Or memory of a time when he'd been something other than Cain's trained killer. "I don't," he said quietly. "Not well. Not for years." The moment stretched. Dutch's finger on the trigger. Sarah holding cubs that represented everything innocent in a world that had forgotten innocence existed. Between them, a choice that would define what kind of man Dutch would be when this was over. A roar shattered the moment. The mother lion came over the wall like an avalanche of fur and fury. She hit Dutch from the side, driving him away from Sarah, putting her body between her cubs and the man with the gun. Dutch's gun went off. The bullet went wide. Then he was on his back with 120 pounds of protective mother on his chest, jaws closing toward his throat. "Wait!" Sarah's voice cracked like a whip. The lion froze, jaws an inch from Dutch's jugular. Her eyes found Sarah's, questioning. Sarah pulled the carved stone from her pocket, held it up. The symbols seemed to glow in the afternoon light, or maybe that was just Sarah's imagination. "He's not worth it," Sarah said in Ute. "He's scared and bought and already dying inside. Let him live with what he's become." The lion's eyes moved from Sarah to Dutch, back to Sarah. Then slowly, deliberately, she stepped off the man's chest. Dutch scrambled backward, breathing like he'd run a mile. His gun was gone, knocked away in the attack. He looked at Sarah with something like wonder. "You just saved my life." "I saved your soul," Sarah corrected. "Your life was never in danger. She could have killed you a dozen times over if that's what she wanted. But she's not a killer. She's a mother protecting her babies, just like I'm a woman protecting my land. We only hurt people when they leave us no choice." Dutch sat up slowly. Around them, his men were scattered, wounded, demoralized. Red Sky had them covered from the tree line, rifle ready but not firing. "This is wrong," Dutch said. Not to Sarah, to himself. All of it. The lies, the killing, the burning. He looked up at her. "Your grandfather tried to talk to me, weeks before he died. Said Cain was using me, using all of us. I didn't listen. And now? Now I think maybe it's time I started." He stood, hands raised, showing he was unarmed, raised his voice. "Stand down! All of you, stand down!" His men looked at him like he'd lost his mind. One of them, young and stupid, raised his rifle toward Dutch's back. Red Sky's shot took the rifle out of his hands before he could fire. The man yelped, shook stinging fingers. "Your boss gave an order," Red Sky called from the trees. "I'd listen if I were you." The men looked at each other. Then, one by one, they lowered their weapons. Sarah approached the mother lion slowly, cubs still wrapped in her jacket. The great cat watched her come, tense but not aggressive. Sarah knelt and carefully, gently, set the cubs on the ground. They scrambled to their mother immediately. She gathered them with her paws, licking their faces, checking them for injuries with the thoroughness only a mother understands. Sarah reached out with the carved stone. Let the lion see it, smell it. The great cat sniffed the stone. Then, impossibly, she touched her nose to Sarah's hand. A gesture of acknowledgement, of gratitude, of understanding between two mothers who'd both lost too much and refused to lose more. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, "for protecting this place, for being the guardian my grandfather said would come." The lion's purr rumbled deep in her chest. Then she picked up the smallest cub by its scruff and began carrying her family toward the forest. The other two followed, stumbling on legs, still learning coordination. At the tree line, the mother lion paused, looked back. Her golden eyes met Sarah's one final time. Then she was gone, melting into shadows and pine needles, like she'd never been there at all. Dutch watched this with the expression of a man whose understanding of the world had just been fundamentally rearranged. "You could have let her kill me." "Could have," Sarah agreed, "but I'm not Cain. I don't solve problems by making bodies." "What now?" Before Sarah could answer, the sound of many horses echoed from the direction of town, coming fast. Red Sky was beside Sarah in seconds. "We need to move, now." But Dutch shook his head. "That's not Cain. That's the marshal. I recognize the riding formation. Federal cavalry escort." Hope surged in Sarah's chest. Daniel did it. He brought them. They moved to the edge of the clearing as the riders appeared. Federal Marshal Henry Harrison rode at the head of 20 cavalry troopers, with Daniel perched behind one of the soldiers, grinning like he'd just won the greatest game ever played. The marshal was exactly what Sarah had imagined. Late 50s, iron gray hair and mustache, eyes that had seen every kind of human wickedness and decided to fight it anyway. He surveyed the scene with those eyes, taking in wounded men, scattered weapons, and Vincent Dutch standing with hands raised. "Miss Sarah Whitemoon?" His voice carried parade ground authority. "That's me. I'm Federal Marshal Henry Harrison. Your nephew delivered some very interesting documents to my office, along with testimony from Reverend Price and several dozen townspeople. I've got questions that need answers, and a warrant for the arrest of Mitchell Kane on charges of fraud, murder, and conspiracy." "Kane's in town," Dutch said, "with Sheriff Hoskins, probably planning his next move." Harrison's eyebrows rose. "And you are?" "Vincent Dutch, head of Kane's security, former Pinkerton agent. Current man trying to do the right thing for the first time in 5 years." "You're confessing?" "I'm testifying, against Kane and everyone working for him. In exchange for immunity and a chance to sleep through the night without seeing dead men's faces." Harrison studied Dutch for a long moment, then nodded. "We'll talk, but first, let's go collect Mr. Kane." They rode for town in formation. Sarah on a cavalry horse, Red Sky beside her, Daniel chattering excitedly about his ride to Silverton and how he'd convinced the marshal
that this couldn't wait for normal bureaucratic channels. As they crested the final ridge, Sarah could see the town spread below. And in the town square, a crowd had gathered. Mary Thornfield stood on the church steps, reading from a document in a voice loud enough to carry. Around her, townspeople listened. Even from this distance, Sarah could see Kane. He stood near the sheriff's office, face red with rage, gesturing angrily. "What's Mary doing?" Sarah asked. Red Sky, whose eyes were sharper, laughed quietly. "Reading Joseph's deed, out loud, to everyone, making it public record that Kane's claim was fraudulent from the start." As they rode into town, Mary's voice rang clear. "And furthermore, by federal treaty signed 1878, all land within sacred Bear Mountain territory is held in trust for the Ute people and cannot be sold, transferred, or claimed by outside parties without express written consent of the tribal council." Kane saw the cavalry coming, saw the marshal, saw Vincent Dutch riding with them instead of against them. The color drained from his face like water from a broken cup. He ran, made it 3 steps before Reverend Price stuck out his cane and sent Kane sprawling face first into the mud. The townspeople erupted in cheers. Marshal Harrison dismounted, pulled Kane to his feet, and clapped iron manacles around his wrists with the calm efficiency of a man who'd done this 1,000 times. "Mitchell Kane, you're under arrest for fraud, murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and a list of other charges so long it'll take me an hour to read them all. You have the right to remain silent, and I strongly suggest you exercise it." Kane sputtered. "You can't do this. I have lawyers. I have rights. I have connections in Denver who will bury you." "Your connections in Denver are also under investigation," Harrison said pleasantly. "Turns out when you bribe one federal official, we tend to look real close at everyone else you've been talking to. Funny how that works." Sheriff Hoskins tried to slip away in the confusion. John Baker, the feed store owner, stopped him with a rifle across his path. "Where you going, Sheriff? Marshal might want to talk to you too." Hoskins deflated like a punctured bladder. Harrison looked around at the gathered townspeople, at Sarah and Red Sky and young Daniel, at Mary Thornfield holding Joseph's deed like a battle flag, at Dutch and his wounded men who'd followed orders right up until they'd decided orders weren't worth following anymore. "Someone want to tell me what the hell happened here?" Sarah stepped forward. "I made a promise to my grandfather to protect this land. These people helped me keep it." "These people" meaning half the town, an Apache scout, a mountain lion, and a 14-year-old boy? "Yes, sir." Harrison was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. It transformed his face from stern lawman to something almost grandfatherly. "Ma'am, I've been a marshal for 30 years, seen range wars, mining disputes, claim jumping, and every other kind of frontier violence you can imagine. But this?" He gestured at the scene around them. "This might be the first time I've seen regular people stand up to money and power and actually win." "We haven't won yet," Sarah said. "Not until Kane faces trial." "Oh, he'll face trial. And with Dutch's testimony plus the documents you provided, he'll hang." Harrison's expression hardened. Men like Kane think money makes them untouchable. About time they learned different. Reverend Price approached, extending his hand. "Marshal, welcome to our town. We've prepared rooms at the church for you and your men. And Miss Sarah, I believe you have some business to attend to." He gestured toward Elder Tahoma, who stood at the edge of the crowd with a dozen Ute tribal members. They'd come down from their village, drawn by news that had spread through the mountains faster than any telegraph. Sarah crossed to them.
knelt before Tahoma in a gesture of respect. "Rise, child," the old man said. "You kneel before no one, not any more." He pulled her to her feet, placed his hands on her shoulders. "The mountain chose you. The guardian accepted you. The spirits of our ancestors sing your name." Sarah Whitemoon, granddaughter of Joseph, daughter of the mountain, you are she who guards returned. He pulled from his robe a necklace, ancient beadwork in patterns Sarah recognized from childhood stories, the necklace worn by female warriors in the old times. "Your grandfather kept this for you. Knew one day you'd be ready to wear it." Sarah's vision blurred with tears as Tahoma placed the necklace around her neck. The weight of it settled against her chest like an anchor, like home, like everything she'd lost and everything she'd found. Red Sky watched from a respectful distance. When her eyes found his, he smiled, pride written clear on his scarred face. Daniel pushed through the crowd and wrapped his arms around her waist. "You did it, Aunt Sarah. You kept your promise." Sarah held him close, looked around at the faces surrounding her. Mary and the townspeople who'd risked everything. Reverend Price and his unshakable faith. Dutch and his broken men learning to be whole again. Elder Tahoma and her people reclaiming what had always been theirs. Red Sky, who'd come looking for a place to die and found a reason to live. And somewhere in the mountains, a mother lion with her cubs, teaching them to hunt and survive in a world that was dangerous, but still, occasionally, just. "No," Sarah said. "We did it. All of us. Together." The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors that reminded Sarah of the necklace at her throat, of blood and courage and new beginnings. Marshal Harrison cleared his throat. "Well, this is all very touching, but I still need statements from everyone. It's going to be a long night." "Then we better get started," Sarah said. She had promises to keep, and this time she'd see them through to the end. 6 months had passed since Mitchell Kane rode out of town in chains, and Sarah Whitemoon was learning that victory sometimes felt a lot like starting over. She stood on the porch of the new cabin, watching dawn paint the mountain in shades of gold and rose. The structure behind her was larger than Joseph's had been, built with help from townspeople who'd spent weekends hauling timber and driving nails into wood that still smelled of pine sap and promise. It had 2 proper bedrooms now, a root cellar deep enough to keep food through the hardest winter, and windows that faced all 4 directions so she could see anyone coming long before they arrived. The mountains had taught her to watch, to wait, to never assume the world was finished testing you. Daniel emerged from the cabin carrying 2 tin cups of coffee that steamed in the cool morning air. He was taller now, or maybe it was just that he carried himself differently. The boy who'd hidden in root cellars had become the young man who'd ridden alone through hostile territory to save lives. Growth happened like that sometimes, not gradually, but in sudden jumps when circumstances demanded it. Aunt Sarah, Red Sky just rode up from town, says the trial verdict came through on the telegraph this morning. Sarah took the offered coffee, wrapping her hands around the cup's warmth. And? Guilty. All charges. Judge sentenced Kane to hang. Sarah felt something settle in her chest. Not satisfaction exactly. Justice didn't bring back the dead or undo the harm, but it closed a door that had been standing open too long. When? 2 weeks. Denver Territorial Prison. Marshal Harrison says we can attend if we want, as witnesses.
Sarah sipped her coffee, thinking. Part of her wanted to watch Mitchell Kane pay the final price for what he'd done to Joseph, to Marcus Redbird, to all the others whose names filled his ledger of greed. But another part, the part that had learned something about mercy from a mountain lion who'd spared Vincent Dutch's life, wondered what good it would do to watch a man die.
I'll think about it.
Red Sky appeared from the trail below, his horse picking its way up the steep path with the sureness of an animal that had made this journey many times. He'd moved into a small cabin a mile down the mountain 3 months ago, close enough to help if needed, far enough to preserve the independence both he and Sarah valued. Though lately, that distance had begun to feel more like habit than necessity. He dismounted and looped his horse's reins over the porch rail. "Morning. Daniel tell you?" He did. Red Sky studied her face with eyes that had learned to read her silences. "You're not happy about it." "I'm not unhappy. Just wondering if watching a man hang makes us any better than he was." "It makes us lawful. There's a difference between execution and murder." "Is there? When the end result is the same?" Daniel looked between them, sensing an argument brewing. "I'll go check the snares," he announced, and disappeared with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned when adults needed space to work things out. Red Sky leaned against the porch rail. "You think Kane deserves mercy?" "I think I've seen enough death. Thomas, Ava, Joseph, even the men who died working for Kane, following orders they thought would make them rich." Sarah set down her coffee. "When does it stop?" "When men like Kane stop taking what isn't theirs." "And killing him teaches what lesson? That we're willing to kill to protect what's ours? How is that different from what he did?" Red Sky was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of years spent wrestling with similar questions. "It's different because we followed the law. We didn't lynch him in the street or shoot him in the back. We arrested him, tried him, let 12 citizens hear the evidence and decide his fate. That's civilization, Sarah. That's what separates us from the wilderness. The wilderness never pretended to be anything but what it was. Civilization dresses murder in black robes and calls it justice." "You sound like you want him to live." "I want to stop carrying the weight of dead men, even ones who deserved dying." Red Sky crossed to her, close enough that she could see the silver threading through his black hair, the new lines around his eyes that spoke of nights spent watching and waiting. Close enough that she could smell leather and horse, and the particular scent of mountain sage that clung to anyone who spent their days in high places. "The judge offered you a choice," he said quietly. "You can attend the execution, or you can stay here. Either way, Kane dies. Either way, the law is satisfied. The only question is whether you need to see it to believe it's real." Sarah looked past him to the mountain, to Sacred Bear rising against the morning sky like it had for millennia before humans arrived, and would for millennia after they were gone. The mountain didn't care about justice or mercy, or the small dramas of creatures who measured their lives in decades instead of eons. "I need to visit Joseph's grave," she said. "Help me decide what he would have wanted." They rode down together, leaving Daniel to watch the cabin. The trail wound through terrain Sarah could navigate blindfolded now, past the cave where she'd hidden from Kane's men, past the clearing where the mountain lion had first appeared, past all the places where this story had unfolded like a flower opening to brutal sunlight. The Ute burial ground lay in a sheltered valley where ancient pines grew so thick the sun only reached the ground in scattered fragments. Joseph rested here among his ancestors, his grave marked with a simple stone that bore his name and the dates that bookended a life well lived. Sarah knelt and placed her hand on the stone. It was cool despite the morning sun,
solid and permanent in a way that living things could never be. "Grandfather, I need your wisdom." Red Sky remained on his horse, giving her space for private conversation with the dead. "Cain will hang for what he did to you, to all of us. The law says this is justice. But I keep thinking about Ava, about how I'd give anything to have saved her. And I wonder if taking more lives really balances the ones already lost. Does killing Cain bring you back? Does it make the world better, or just smaller?" The wind moved through the pines with a sound like distant voices. Sarah closed her eyes and listened, the way Joseph had taught her to listen to the mountain's wisdom. What came to her wasn't Joseph's voice exactly, more like memory of things he'd said when she was young, and the world seemed simpler. "Justice isn't about making things even, granddaughter. It's about making things right. And sometimes right means consequences. Sometimes right means mercy. The hard part is knowing which is which." Sarah opened her eyes. "I don't know which this is." "You will. When the moment comes, you'll know." She stood and turned to Red Sky. "I'm going to the execution, not because I want to watch him die, but because I need to see this finished, need to know it's really over." Red Sky nodded. "Then we'll go together. You shouldn't face this alone." "I'm not alone. Haven't been since you walked into my life with a rifle and an attitude." He smiled. It was the small, private smile he saved for her. The one that made her aware of how close they'd grown over these months, working together, building together, learning to trust in ways neither had trusted anyone in years. "When this is done," Red Sky said carefully, "I've been thinking maybe I should look for work. Guiding, maybe. Hunting. Something to earn my keep instead of living off charity." "You're not living off charity. You've earned everything 10 times over. Still, a man needs purpose, needs to feel useful." Sarah understood what he wasn't saying, that 6 months of peace had left him restless, that a warrior needed battles, even if those battles were just against the mountain's weather and his own demons. "What if your purpose was here, with me and Daniel, building something that lasts?" The words hung between them like smoke from a campfire, visible but ephemeral, waiting to see which way the wind would blow them. Red Sky dismounted and came to stand beside her. "What exactly are you asking?" "I'm asking if you want to stay, not as a guest or hired help, as family." "Sarah, I'm Apache, you're Ute. Your people and mine have been enemies more often than allies." "Were enemies," past tense. "And my people are whoever stands with me when it matters. You've stood, you've bled, you've kept faith when you could have run. That makes you family in every way that counts." Red Sky reached out and took her hand. His palm was calloused and warm and steady. "You sure about this? Once I stay, I won't leave easy. I'm stubborn that way. I'm counting on it." They stood together in the burial ground, surrounded by ancestors who'd loved and fought and died for the same dirt now beneath their feet. And Sarah felt something she hadn't felt since before Thomas died. Not quite happiness, which seemed too simple a word. More like rightness. Like puzzle pieces finally sliding into place after years of not quite fitting. The ride back was quiet but comfortable. The kind of quiet that exists between people who don't need words to fill every silence. When they reached the cabin, they found visitors waiting. Mary Thornfield sat on the porch with Reverend Price, both of them drinking coffee Daniel had obviously made. The boys' coffee was terrible, but neither guest seemed inclined to mention it. "Got news," Mary announced without preamble. She'd never been one for social niceties.
Federal governments approved the permanent land designation. Sacred Bear Mountain is officially protected tribal territory. Can't be sold, mined, or developed without direct tribal council approval. Sarah felt her knees go weak. It's over? Really over? Really over. Papers came through yesterday. Elder Tahoma has the official documents. Reverend Price set down his coffee cup. There's more. The territorial governor wants to meet with you. Apparently your case has drawn attention in Washington. There's talk of using it as a model for protecting other sacred sites. Red Sky snorted. Politicians. They ignore you when you're fighting for your life, then climb over each other to take credit once you've won. Let them take credit, Sarah said. As long as the land is safe, I don't care who gets praised. That's remarkably mature of you, Mary observed. Most people would want recognition. Most people didn't watch their grandfather die for this dirt. I just want it protected. Everything else is noise. They spent the afternoon going over details. The legal framework that would govern the protected land. The role Sarah would play as official liaison between the tribal council and federal government. The boundaries that had been surveyed and marked. It was tedious work, full of words like jurisdiction and statutory authority and bureaucratic procedures that made Sarah's head ache. But beneath the tedium was something solid, something permanent, something that would outlast Mitchell Kane and his greed, and anyone else who thought land could be owned rather than protected. As the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, their visitors departed. Mary, with her usual gruff efficiency, Reverend Price, with blessings and promises to see them at Sunday services. When they were gone, Sarah, Red Sky, and Daniel sat on the porch watching light fade from the sky. "Aunt Sarah," Daniel said eventually, "are we rich now, since we own all this land?" Sarah laughed. "We don't own it. We protect it. There's a difference. But we could sell it. The government would pay. Could, but won't. Some things aren't for sale." The boy considered this. "Grandfather Joseph taught you that." "He did, along with about 1,000 other lessons I'm still learning." Red Sky stood and stretched. "I should head back to my cabin. Early start tomorrow if we're riding to Denver." Sarah caught his arm. "Or you could stay here tonight. Save the ride down and back. We've got the spare room now." Their eyes met. Understanding passed between them, the kind that required no words. "All right," Red Sky said. "I'll stay." Daniel looked between them with the knowing expression of a 14-year-old who understood more than adults gave him credit for. "I'll sleep in the loft. Give you two the bedrooms." "Daniel." "It's fine, Aunt Sarah. I like the loft. Can see the stars through the window up there." He disappeared inside before she could argue, leaving Sarah and Red Sky alone under a sky beginning to fill with stars. "He's a good kid," Red Sky said. "He is. Growing up fast." "They all do. Question is whether we grow with them or get left behind." Sarah leaned against the porch rail, feeling the solid wood beneath her hands. Wood that townspeople had cut and shaped and raised with their own labor. Community effort. Something built together. "I've been thinking about what you said, about needing purpose." "And?" "There's a lot of land here. More than one person can protect. More than two, even. But if we built something real, something that showed other people how to live with the land, instead of just taking from it, maybe that would be purpose enough." Red Sky moved to stand beside her. "You want to start a school? Teach conservation?" "Maybe. Or maybe just prove it's possible to live well without destroying everything around you. Show that protection and prosperity aren't opposites." "That's a long-term vision." "I'm not going anywhere.
Are you?" He took her hand again. "No, I'm not going anywhere." They stood together as full dark settled over the mountain. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. Another answered, the night chorus beginning its ancient song. Inside the cabin, Daniel was already asleep in the loft, dreaming whatever dreams 14-year-old boys dream about. Dreams of becoming men, of finding their place in a world that seemed both infinite and impossibly small. Tomorrow, Sarah and Red Sky would ride to Denver, would watch justice served in the form of a rope and a trap door, would close this chapter and begin writing the next. But tonight, they stood together on a porch built from community and courage, watched stars emerge in a sky that stretched forever, felt the mountain beneath their feet, solid and eternal. Sarah thought about Joseph, about Thomas and Ava, about all the people who'd died so she could stand here, in this moment, with this man, on this land. "I hope I make you proud," she whispered to the dead. The wind carried her words away, and somewhere, she imagined, Joseph smiled. The mountain endured. The guardian watched. And two people who'd been broken by loss learned that sometimes healing came not from forgetting, but from finding new reasons to stand. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, but tonight there was peace. And peace, Sarah was learning, was worth fighting for. The Denver Territorial Prison stood against the morning sky like a monument to human failure. Gray stone walls rose 30 feet high, topped with guard towers where men with rifles watched for anyone foolish enough to try entering or leaving without permission. Sarah Whitemoon stood across the street, staring at those walls, wondering if justice lived inside them, or if it had died somewhere along the way. Red Sky stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "You don't have to go in. Watching won't change anything." "I know, but I need to see his face. Need to know he understands what he lost." They'd ridden 3 days to reach Denver, camping under stars that seemed colder the farther they got from the mountain. Daniel had stayed behind with Mary Thornfield, disappointed but understanding when Sarah explained that some things young eyes shouldn't witness. Death, even lawful death, left marks on the soul. Marshal Harrison emerged from the prison's main entrance, his silver badge catching morning light. He'd aged since Sarah first met him. Or maybe it was just that the weight of enforcing law in a lawless territory showed more clearly away from the frontier. "Miss Whitemoon, Mr. Walker, right on time." He gestured toward the entrance. "Execution set for 10 o'clock. You'll watch from the gallery with the other witnesses. 20 minutes, then it's done." Sarah's stomach tightened. 20 minutes. A man's entire existence compressed into the time it took to boil water for coffee. They followed Harrison through corridors that smelled of mold and unwashed bodies and despair. Other witnesses were already gathering, newspaper reporters with notebooks and cynical eyes, government officials who'd traveled from Washington to ensure justice was properly served, a few citizens whose faces Sarah didn't recognize, but whose expressions she knew intimately. People who'd lost something to Mitchell Kane and came seeking closure in hemp rope and gravity. Vincent Dutch stood apart from the others, leaning against a wall with the posture of a man who'd stopped caring what anyone thought. He'd testified against Kane during the trial, providing details that sealed the conviction. Now he wore the haunted look of someone who'd saved his own life by destroying whatever he used to be. He caught Sarah's eye and nodded once. She returned the gesture. They weren't friends, would never be friends, but they'd both survived Kane, and that created a bond stranger than friendship. A guard led them to the gallery, a raised platform overlooking the execution chamber. Below, the gallows waited. 13 steps leading up to a platform, a noose hanging from a crossbeam like a question mark asking terrible things. A trapdoor beneath, freshly oiled, ready to drop. Sarah had seen death before, had watched Thomas die in her arms as a grizzly's wounds bled him dry, had held Ava through her final breaths as consumption stole what little strength remained. But this was different. This was death by appointment. Death scheduled and sanctioned and dressed in the costume of civilization. The chamber door opened. Mitchell Kane entered in chains. He'd lost weight during 6 months of confinement, his expensive suit hanging loose on a frame that had shrunk like wool in hot water. But his eyes were the same, still calculating, still searching for angles and advantages, still believing that somehow, even now, money or connections or sheer force of will could save him. He climbed the 13 steps slowly. The guards gave him time, a small mercy in a morning devoid of larger ones. At the top, he turned to face the witnesses. His eyes found Sarah's. For a moment, the world contracted to just the two of them. The man who'd killed for greed, the woman who'd fought for something larger than herself. Predator and protector, taker and guardian. Kane's lips moved.
Sarah couldn't hear the words across the distance, but she could read them on his lips. This doesn't end anything. Maybe he was right. Maybe somewhere another man like Kane was already scheming to take what didn't belong to him. Maybe greed never really died, just found new bodies to inhabit. But today, this greed ended here. The prison chaplain stepped forward, offering final prayers. Kane refused them with a shake of his head. He'd spent his life worshipping money. Too late to pretend other gods mattered now. The executioner placed the noose around Kane's neck, adjusted it with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this too many times. Asked if Kane had final words. Kane looked at Sarah again. When he spoke, his voice carried across the chamber with surprising strength. I was a businessman. Everything I did was legal. Everything was profit and loss and calculated risk. You people act like I'm a monster, but I just understood how the world really works. The strong take. The weak cry about justice. That's nature. That's truth. That's a lie. Red Sky's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. Everyone turned to look at him. He stepped forward to the gallery's edge, his scarred face hard as stone. I spent 7 years wearing the uniform of men who believed that lie, who thought strength gave them the right to take whatever they wanted. And you know what I learned? Kane stared at him, silent. That the strongest people aren't the ones who take. They're the ones who protect, who stand between predators and prey, who choose to be guardians instead of thieves. Sarah Whitemoon is worth 10,000 of you, and the world will forget your name within a year, while hers will be remembered for generations. The executioner looked to Marshal Harrison. The marshal nodded. The black hood came down over Kane's face. Sarah wanted to look away. Every instinct screamed to close her eyes, to spare herself this final image. But she'd come to witness, to ensure this actually happened, to carry the weight of what justice looked like when stripped of comfortable abstractions. The executioner pulled the lever. The trapdoor opened. Kane dropped. The rope snapped taut, with a sound Sarah would hear in nightmares for months afterward. Kane's body jerked once, then hung still, swaying slightly.
a pendulum marking the passage from life to death in the space of a heartbeat. The chamber was silent, except for the creak of rope against wood. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the prison doctor climbed the steps, checked for a pulse, nodded to the marshal. Mitchell Kane is dead. Sentence carried out in accordance with territorial law. May God have mercy on his soul. Sarah realized she was crying. Not for Kane. For everyone he'd killed. For Joseph and Marcus Redbird, and the 15 miners who died in collapsed tunnels. For Ava and Thomas and everyone else who'd been taken by forces beyond their control. For the weight of living in a world where justice required death. Red Sky's hand found hers, squeezed gently, reminding her she wasn't alone. They filed out of the chamber in silence. Outside, the Denver morning continued indifferent to what had happened in stone rooms beneath gray walls. People walked past, going about their business. Vendors hawked newspapers. Horses pulled wagons. The city breathed and moved and lived, while Kane's body cooled on a gallows 13 steps high. Vincent Dutch was waiting by their horses. He looked even more haunted in daylight. "I'm leaving Colorado," he announced without preamble. "Going east. Maybe get work as a Pinkerton again. Maybe just disappear. But I can't stay here. Can't keep seeing his face every time I close my eyes." "You did the right thing," Sarah said. "Testifying. That took courage. Took fear. Fear of hanging beside him." "Don't confuse survival instinct for bravery." Dutch paused, choosing words carefully. "But for what it's worth, I'm glad you won. Glad men like Kane don't always get away with it. Maybe that counts for something." "It counts." He extended his hand. Sarah shook it. His grip was firm, brief, the handshake of a man eager to finish business and move on. "Goodbye, Miss Whitemoon. I hope you find whatever peace looks like for people like us." Then he was gone, walking into Denver's crowds and disappearing like smoke in wind. Marshal Harrison approached, looking tired in the way lawmen always looked after executions, like enforcing justice cost something that couldn't quite be named. "There's a territorial council meeting in 3 days. Governor wants to discuss the sacred Bear Mountain designation. Make sure the protection is iron tight. He'd like you there." "I'll come." "Bring your evidence. Bring Joseph's documents. Let's make this so official that Kane's ghost couldn't challenge it." They shook hands, and the marshal departed, leaving Sarah and Red Sky alone with their horses and their thoughts. "Want to stay in Denver a few days?" Red Sky asked. "Or head back to the mountain?" Sarah looked at the city sprawling around them. All these people living on top of each other, breathing each other's smoke, sharing each other's diseases. It felt suffocating after months of mountain air, and spaces where you could see weather coming from 50 miles away. "Let's go home." They rode out as the sun reached its peak, put Denver behind them, and pointed their horses toward mountains that rose blue and eternal on the western horizon. Toward home. Toward the land Sarah had fought to protect and won the right to guard. The journey back was slower than the journey out. They weren't running toward anything now, just returning to lives that waited patient as stone. On the second night, camped beside a stream that sang over rocks smooth from 1,000 years of water, Red Sky asked the question Sarah had been expecting. "Do you feel different, now that it's done?" Sarah considered this while tending their small fire. "I thought I would. Thought watching him die would feel like closing a door. But it just feels like opening a different one. The fight's over, but the work's just beginning." "What work?" "Protecting what we saved. teaching Daniel how to be a guardian, building something that lasts longer than one generation. She looked at him across flames that painted his face in shifting shadows. Building it with you, if you're willing. Red Sky was quiet for so long, she thought he might refuse. Then he spoke, and his voice carried the weight of decisions that couldn't be unmade. I've been alone a long time. Since Ayana died, I've been moving through the world like a ghost. Present, but not really there. Helping people, but never staying long enough to matter. I told myself it was because I didn't deserve to settle, didn't deserve peace after what I did for the army. And now? Now I think maybe punishment is just another form of selfishness. Easier to carry guilt than to put it down and do better. He met her eyes. You make me want to do better. Make me think maybe redemption isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up and fighting for what matters. Sarah crossed to his side of the fire, sat close enough that their shoulders touched. I'm not asking for perfect. I'm asking for present, for someone who shows up when it's hard. You've already proven you can do that. What about Daniel? He's your family. Does he get a say? He already had one. Told me last week that if I didn't ask you to stay permanently, he'd do it himself. Said any man who teaches him to track and shoot and think before acting deserves to be called family. Red Sky's laugh came quiet and genuine. Kid's got sense. He learned from his aunt. They sat together, watching stars emerge in a sky that went on forever. Tomorrow, they'd ride further. The day after that, they'd reach the mountain. Daniel would meet them with questions and stories about everything that happened while they were gone. Mary would want details about the execution. Reverend Price would offer prayers and wisdom, and probably coffee terrible enough to strip paint. Life would continue. The mountain would stand. And Sarah would protect both, with help from a man who'd learned that strength wasn't about taking. It was about choosing what to defend. 3 days later, they crested the final ridge and saw the cabin waiting. Smoke rose from its chimney. Daniel must have kept the fire going, the way Sarah taught him. Keep the home fires burning so people coming back from darkness knew where to find light. But something else waited too. On the porch sat a familiar golden shape, the mountain lion, the guardian. Watching their approach, with eyes that held intelligence Sarah had stopped questioning months ago. Beside her, 3 cubs, grown larger and stronger. 10 months old now, still spotted, but losing their baby markings. Not yet ready to leave their mother's protection, but learning the independence that would come soon enough. Sarah dismounted slowly, approached the porch with hands visible and empty. The lion watched her come, calm and unafraid. Sarah pulled the carved stone from her pocket, the one Joseph had left her, held it up so the lion could see. "We won," Sarah said softly in Ute. "The land is protected. Your home is safe." The lion stood, stretched, then did something Sarah would tell herself later she must have imagined. The great cat walked to Sarah and pressed her massive head against Sarah's chest, a gesture of affection, of gratitude, of recognition between 2 mothers who'd fought for what mattered. Sarah's hand found the soft fur behind the lion's ears, scratched gently. The purr that rumbled through the cat's chest was loud enough to feel through Sarah's ribs. Then the guardian stepped back, looked at her cubs. They rose and followed as she walked past Sarah and Red Sky, past the cabin, toward the deeper forest where they lived. At the tree line, the mother lion paused, looked back one final time. Sarah raised her hand in farewell. The lion dipped her head once. Then she was gone, melting into shadows with her family, returning to the wild places where guardians belonged. The next morning, Elder Tahoma arrived with the tribal council. They came in ceremonial dress, carrying the old ways with them like precious cargo. Drums, sage, the sacred pipe that had witnessed 100 generations of promises. On the ridge where Sarah had first seen sacred Bear Mountain whole and unburned, they gathered. Tahoma stood before Sarah, Red Sky, and Daniel. Behind him, the council formed a circle. Behind them, townspeople who'd fought alongside them. Mary, Reverend Price, Robert Chen, even some of Dutch's men who'd turned against Cain. 2 communities, 1 purpose. Sarah Whitemoon, Tahoma's voice carried across the mountain. Step forward. She did, heart pounding. You have walked through fire, faced those who would destroy sacred ground, stood when others would have run. The mountain has tested you. The guardian has accepted you. The ancestors have witnessed. He placed the ancient warrior's necklace around her neck. The weight of it settled like destiny. I name you, she who guards returned, protector of sacred Bear Mountain, voice of the voiceless, defender of those who cannot defend themselves. Do you accept this burden? Sarah looked at the faces around her, at Red Sky, who'd found his redemption standing beside her, at Daniel, who'd become a man protecting what mattered, at Mary and the townspeople who'd risked everything for what was right, at the mountain itself, rising eternal and patient behind them all. I accept. The drums began. The old songs rose, and Sarah Whitemoon became something more than herself. She became the guardian. Daniel burst from the cabin, all excitement and questions. Aunt Sarah, Red Sky, you're back. Was it horrible? Did Cain say anything? Did Dutch really testify? Is it over? Is it really over? Sarah wrapped her nephew in a hug that lifted him off his feet, despite his protests that he was too old for such things. It's over. Really over. So what happens now? Sarah looked at Red Sky. He smiled and nodded. Now we build something that lasts, Sarah said. The 3 of us. Together. Red Sky is staying? For real? For real. Daniel's whoop of joy echoed off the mountain walls. He grabbed Red Sky's hand and Sarah's, pulling them toward the cabin. Come on! I made stew! It's probably terrible, but Mary said the trying is what counts. And Elder Tahoma came by yesterday. He wants to perform a ceremony. Something about officially naming you guardian. And there's a letter from the governor. And his words tumbled over each other, like water over stones, young and enthusiastic and alive in ways that reminded Sarah why fighting mattered. They entered the cabin together. Daniel's stew was indeed terrible, but they ate it anyway, because family meant accepting imperfection with grace. They read the governor's letter, which formally appointed Sarah as protected land liaison, with official authority and actual salary. They planned for Elder Tahoma's ceremony and discussed what crops they'd plant come spring. They lived. Later, after Daniel fell asleep and the fire burned low, Sarah and Red Sky sat on the porch watching the mountain disappear into darkness. Do you think Joseph would approve? Sarah asked. Of all this? Of us? I think Joseph set this all in motion, knowing exactly what would happen. That deed for $5 wasn't random. He chose you because he knew you'd fight, knew you'd find allies, knew you'd become what the mountain needed. And you? Are you what the mountain needs? Red Sky took her hand, laced his fingers through hers. "I'm what you need, and that's enough purpose for one lifetime." Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder, felt the solid warmth of him, the steady presence that had become her anchor through storms she'd thought would drown her. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing up, for staying, for fighting beside me. Thank you for giving me a reason to stop running." They sat together until the cold drove them inside, banked the fire, checked that Daniel was warm beneath his blankets, moved through the comfortable rituals of people building a life together. Before Sarah blew out the lamp, she looked one more time at the photograph she kept on the small table by her bed. Thomas and Ava, smiling from a time when the world seemed kinder. "I kept my promise," she told them. "Protected the land, found purpose again, found people to stand with. You'd like Red Sky. He's stubborn like Thomas was, brave like Ava wanted to be." She touched their faces one last time, then placed the photograph face down the way she had 6 months ago, not forgetting, never forgetting, but letting them rest while she kept living. Outside, the mountain stood eternal and indifferent under stars that had watched empires rise and fall, and would watch civilizations yet unborn. The guardian was out there somewhere with her cubs, teaching them to hunt and survive and protect their territory. Daniel slept the deep sleep of the young and unburdened. Red Sky breathed quiet and steady in the next room, his presence a promise that she wasn't alone anymore. And Sarah Whitemoon, granddaughter of Joseph Silverwolf, she who guards returned, protector of sacred Bear Mountain, closed her eyes and dreamed of futures built on foundations stronger than greed. Some promises cost blood, but keeping them cost more, cost grief and fear, and the willingness to stand when standing seemed impossible. And some promises, once kept, opened doors to possibilities you never imagined when you first swore the oath. The mountain endured, the guardian watched, and Sarah learned that sometimes the best way to honor the dead was to build something worth living for. The end.